Hi everyone. Today's short lesson is going to be on variables. So it's sort of an introduction to variables for those of you that might still be struggling what a variable is. And so when we talk about variables in math, it's similar to what we talk about in science. In science, we have changes that happen during an experiment to see if you have different outcomes. Those are called independent variables. And then we have those variables as results from what you did for changes during the experiment, and those are called independent variables. But the word variable has this root word vary in it, which if I vary something, I probably am not doing the norm, or I have changed something from what might be the same thing I do all the time, so I vary it. And so variables really probably means about the same thing in math as in science. It's a change going on. And where that change comes from is a letter that is representing a value or number. And that letter can be any letter. I like to use the lowercase n a lot of times for my variables that I use. And that letter then is going to be replaced by a number. Now that number could be infinite numbers that work, and we call that a general pattern. General pattern is when you are able to replace that variable with any number and the statement's going to come out true. So in this case, I give you some examples of n plus 0 equals n. No matter what number you put in for n to replace it, it's going to always come out true. Those are called rules or properties of math, and there's many of them. This is actually the property, identity property of addition, stumbling over my words. So the identity property of addition, because anytime I add a number to 0, I know the answer already, the identity of the answer. It is that number. So that is one property or law, or a general pattern that always works with everything you put into that variable as an answer. And then I have another one here, n times 0 will always equal 0. So that is another property of math called the zero property of multiplication, that anytime I multiply a number, which I can replace n for any number, times 0, I'm going to get 0. And then here's another general pattern in math, or a property or law, that says n times 1 will always equal that number also. So there are different properties and rules that we call general patterns that fit a variable of any number for that variable. To replace it, I'm going to get a true statement. Now, once I have put a value in for that n, we call those special cases. Special cases are when I'm going to actually put a value in for n. So let's put the number n equals 2. So we're going to use that here, and if I put a 2 here, what answer do I get? Is 2. So this is a special case because I replaced the n for the value of 2, so 2 plus 0 equals 2. And that's called then a special case, because now I no longer have the variable, but I've replaced the variable, the letter, with an actual number, a specific value, special, specific. So similar in their root words also. So if I put 2 here, 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 1 is 2. So those general patterns that I used as examples here, any number I put in there, 1,000,000 plus 0 is 1,000,000. So it doesn't matter what number I put in there, it should always come out true if the general pattern is a good one. You can have false ones, so you always need to check it with a special case to see if it works out into that number. And so if I have a special or a general pattern that says n plus n equals 2n, is that a good general pattern? So any number, if I want to make a special case, let's take 5. So if I say n equals 5, 5 plus 5, because n is 5, equals 2. And then what do we do here? Does that mean I just put a 5 in place of the n, or the variable, and so that's going to be 25? Well, would that make sense? 5 plus 5 equals 25? No, that doesn't. So in math, in algebra, we're going to understand that for expressions in algebra, called algebraic expressions, we can sometimes see, and most of the times you are going to see this in our future math classes, that if I have a variable that sits right by a number, that is a multiplication going on. So this actually says 2 times 5, instead of just replacing the 5 for the n and saying 25, it's 2 times 5. And that is a constant, we call that, and that's the variable. And that constant sometimes is what we call a coefficient. It sits in front of the variable, and that's always a multiplication problem going on when you see that happening, that you're going to see more and more of as our year keeps progressing. So 5 plus 5 equals 10. That's a true statement. That general pattern works every time. This is a good general pattern then. So as we go through this unit, we will work with variables in different ways and understand what a general pattern means versus a special case, and then we can always plug those in. Eventually we're going to talk about formulas, which we've talked about in science already. Well, they are a general pattern because you have your variables and you replace them with values that turn into a special case. So I hope this video helps. Watch it a few times if you need to, and then in class we're going to do some practicing.